Hello and welcome back to the Movable Feasters, Tasting Level 3, the podcast where we explore wines through the lens of our personal WSET 3 learning journey. I am Andrea from the Movable Feasters, and each week we dive into a new wine, unpacking its grape, its region, and tasting it using the SAT. Whether you are studying for WSET or just love discovering new wines, this podcast is for you. Hello and welcome to the first episode of the Movable Feasters Tasting Level 3. For this episode, we actually decided to do something special since we just spent our weekend in Germany on the Mosel, where we got to try not one, not two, but actually 25 different types of German Rieslings from the Mosel. So this time we're not just going to present our systematic approach to tasting regarding one wine, but we're going to try to capture the essence of the wines we have tried. We're going to first start off with the theory, of course. So, German Riesling. Germany is very famous for Riesling. This is a grape variety that thrives in cool climates. It actually buds late, so you usually don't have problems with spring frost. But actually 2024 was a year where there was lots of problems with the spring frost since it came very late, and most of the wine producers told us that they lost up to 70-80% of their wine production. But now back to the Riesling grape. It is a grape that is actually slow ripening, and it has the capacity to preserve high acidity, while the sun exposure on the slopes in the Mosel helped the ripening and developing of its intense, actually signature aromatics. From the recommended list of wines from WSET, you're actually supposed to try a VDP or VDP dry Riesling, one Riesling with some residual sugar like Kabinett or Spätlese, and one sweeter Riesling like Auslese, Beerenauslese, or an ice wine. So we're going to try to focus on this wine during this episode. First of all, in Germany, the PDO wines are classified in Qualitätsweine und Prädikatsweine. And the Prädikatsweine are classified again depending on their residual sugar levels. So the first one with the least sugar is Kabinettwein. Then you go on to Spätlese, which actually means late harvest, to go further to Auslese, which means select harvests where the grapes are actually hand-picked, very ripe, sometimes even affected by botrytis, which of course concentrates the sugars and flavors. If this process goes on for even longer, you will have even higher residual sugar, and the next level would be the Beerenauslese, translated into berry selected harvest. These are wines made from individually picked botrytized grapes that result in very sweet, luscious wines. And the last level is the Trockenbeerenauslese, which is actually dry berry selected harvest. So depending on the time the grapes are picked and the winemaking techniques, you can get wines with very different residual sugar levels, from just a couple of grams to sometimes exceeding even 120 grams per liter. The noble rot you find in these wines actually increases, as I said, the sugar concentration, but it also adds complex flavors of honey, apricot, dried citrus peel, and it has actually its own botrytis character. The sweet Rieslings are the ones that are actually very prized for their balance because they still have a high acidity despite the high sugar levels. They have a great intensity and they have a great aging potential. They develop tertiary characters of petrol, honey over time. A good Riesling you can age well over 10-20 years. So if you're talking about the Mosel region, you are actually talking not just about the Mosel, but also about the Saar and the Ruhr that flow into the Mosel. These two regions, the Saar and the Ruhr, are actually somewhat cooler and they have high acidity. We were told by the winemakers that the wines from the Saar actually sometimes are more complex and more elegant due to the fact that the difference in temperatures between day and night are actually even higher than on the Mosel. So the grapes have even a higher capacity to develop their complex flavors. Of course, all the regions that I mentioned have the well-known steep slopes that offer the chance for the grapes to be exposed to the sun and ripen fully during the season. The Mosel is actually a river that has very many knicks and curvatures. So it has very many spots where the grapes are differently exposed to the sun. So very many microclimates. So actually the wines produced are very different, and that we got to notice very well in our tastings. A couple of places that are worth mentioning are the Piesport, the Bernkastel that has the vineyard that is called the Doctor, so the Bergkasteler Doktor, and the Wellen, but there are also, of course, very many others that produce amazing wines on the Mosel. So, regarding the tasting with it, we come now to the second part of this episode. And as I said, we tried about 25 different Rieslings, so the tasting notes are, of course, very different, but there were some characteristics that we can sum up together. Regarding the appearance, of course, all of the wines we tried were clear. Most of them were lemon, but you could see that with age and with growing sugar levels, residual sugar levels, you also went on to notice a really golden color of the wines. The more the wines were concentrated, the more the color was concentrated. On the nose, usually we had an intense flavors, sometimes medium, but usually the wines were very aromatic and very nice to notice their complexity. In all of the wines we tried, we mostly got primary aromas. We didn't notice any secondary because Riesling is usually wine that is grown and prepared to hold on to its fruity and floral aromas. So the producers actually don't use new oak because they don't want to overpower the wines. And they also don't use malolactic conversion or other winemaking techniques that would give secondary aromas. In some of the wines we tried, which were a bit older, we got to sense some tertiary aromas like honey and honeycomb, especially in the more sweeter wines. Going on to the palate, well, this was very interesting because we got to try wines that were bone dry, so they had almost 2 grams of residual sugar, and we got to try wines that were luscious. So pretty much in the 25 wines we tried were all the levels of sweetness you could get. The acidity was, well, we're talking about Riesling, so high. There were a couple of wines where we said, well, medium plus, but I suppose it was more the perception of the wine depending on the level of residual sugar. The more residual sugar we had, the more well integrated was the acidity of the wine. The alcohol was also interesting because it's very different. We had wines with very low alcohol levels, about 7.5, but we went on to have also medium alcohol levels up to 12.5%. Body also varied a lot. So we had wines with very low body and wines that were very full. That was, of course, also dependent on the sugar level and the alcohol level, but by the Rieslings, the most important thing for the body is the sugar levels. The flavor intensity was mostly medium to pronounced, and even though it's not mentioned in the SAT, I can say that the Beerenauslese wines that we tried were actually very pronounced. The finish was usually medium to long, especially at the GG wines. So this we did not mention yet. We said we have tried some VDP, that stands for Advanced Deutsche für die Kapselweinguter. This is an association in Germany's of Germany's top wineries, which classifies vineyards into tiers based on quality. So they have the Große Lager, which is the highest, and that is followed by the Erste Lager. And in the Große Lager, you can have das große Gewächs, which is a wine that has GG on its bottle with a small grape, which are supposed to be their best dry Rieslings from the best vineyards. The ones we tried actually supported this because they had an amazing finish and amazing complexity and aromas. So we can say that the top quality is actually ensured. Regarding the development of the wines, we can say that some of them were actually too young. The acidity was way too high, and you can notice they could have easily spent a couple of more years in the bottle. But most of the wines we had were in the category you can drink now, but they have potential of aging. Of course, as I said, with the high acidity and the high sugar levels, the Riesling wines usually have a good potential of aging. I will not talk this time about the quality level because, of course, as I said, we tried a lot of wines and they were very different. But we can easily say we haven't tried any wine that was under the good level of quality. So if we are to draw a conclusion from this tasting that we did, we can say that these contrasting, actually Rieslings that we tried, helped us understand the diversity and the quality of the German wines. It is amazing to see what the different microclimates and the different regions where the Rieslings are produced can influence the aromatics and the qualities of the wines. So another thing that I would like to mention at the end is that in the Rieslings we have tasted, you can also really observe the difference on the soil the Riesling is produced in. So that is why actually many producers tell you what type of soil the Riesling was done in. So you might see on the bottle sometimes graue Schiefer, roter Schiefer oder blauer Schiefer. This is the different type of ground that, of course, influences the quality of the wine. So you might have wines that have a higher minerality, a higher iron content. Some wines can be a bit saltier, and that's very interesting to notice how the soil influences the wines. So again, we can only recommend that you do these tastings as well. And for this chapter, we would actually like to recommend that people also do the optional wines. So, as I said, for the essential wines, WSET recommends a Riesling with some residual sugar and a dry Riesling, but we think that the sweet Rieslings, the Auslese and Beerenauslese, definitely had different character and different aromatics. So you can actually have Rieslings that go from a lemon or green apple aroma up to this very luscious wines that we have tried that had only baked fruit aroma. So you had a lot of baked quince and apricots, and the aromatic was so different that we definitely want to recommend that you also try the optional wine from the list. So this would be it for the first episode. We hoped you enjoyed our tasting notes on the Rieslings. That's a wrap for today's episode of Tasting Level 3. Don't forget to follow us, the Movable Feasters, on Instagram for more tasting adventures. We do a reel on each podcast episode where you can leave us a comment or your remarks on the episode. Cheers to learning one glass at a time.